Hey everybody, Z Garcia here, and today we're going to be diving into the Cthulhu mythos and trying to hang on to our sanity in Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. This is the latest game in the long line of Arkham Horror and Arkham Horror adjacent games. So we've had the original, it's Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, there was Eldritch Horror, Mansions of Madness, Elder Sign, the dice game, the very popular card game, Arkham Horror the card game, and now this one, which is, as I said, Arkham Horror 3rd Edition, though it doesn't really say that anywhere. This is simply the new Arkham Horror, kind of like the iPad. And so the idea here is to make a game that feels more streamlined, more story-driven, and, is simply a refinement of what's come before. Does it do that? We're going to get to what I think about that. The game comes with 4 scenarios, and you are going to use the archive system, this idea of having cards kind of further the story, in order to go through those stories, find out what you're even attempting to do, and possibly take differing paths through that story. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. I'm not going to go into every detail. I'll just give you, a general overview of what's going on. We'll come on back after that. I'll tell you what I think of it. The first thing that players are going to do is decide which scenario they'd like to play. And this is going to tell you how to set up the board with the various tiles, some of the tokens and such that begin in play. It's going to tell you the monster deck, which cards to make that up with, and the Mythos Cup, which tokens go in there, as well as down here, which cards to put into the setup for the story to be in play. And you are going to follow those cards in order to find out what your objective in the game is and progress along with the story. So here's what the scenario looks like set up. We've got the 2 characters we are playing. We've put out some clues, set up the map, set up the monster deck down there, everything. So the players are going to pick one of the characters. That character is going to have all of their statistics there. And then on the back, some story and what they begin with. Now these cards are tied to that character. And you are going to get 1 card, some starting money, and then you make a choice out of 2 other cards. So Agnes Baker over here is beginning with her the Heirloom of Hyperborea, which she always begins with, and then she has a choice of 2 cards, so I gave her the Storm of Spirits here. And then, as I said, some money as well. And then the players are going to be taking turns going through the different steps, the different phases in the game, until the game comes to its conclusion. So, I'm going to show you what the breakdown of a turn is, but before we do that, I'm going to show you the final setup step would have been putting out some of these cards here that are sort of the story deck. These are further along the story. So you put a couple of cards out that are going to tell you what is going on. They tell you the story, and they kind of tell you what's happening. So basically, what we're trying to do is put clues on the scenario and avoid putting doom on the scenario. Depending on which of those things happens first, you'll reveal a new card from that deck and, again, push the story forward. So here's the breakdown of every turn. You have an action phase, you have a monster phase, an encounter phase, and a mythos phase, and they go like this. During the action phase, the players are going to take 2 actions. And I'll show you what the actions are. During the monster phase, every ready monster is going to activate, usually by moving. Then the engaged monsters are going to deal damage or horror. And then the exhausted monsters are going to ready. Then during the encounter phase, everyone is going to draw an encounter card that matches where they are, unless they're engaged with a monster. And that's what these decks out here are for. So if this character ends up here in downtown, then we're going to draw a downtown card and read the one for the Arkham Asylum on the other side of the card here and see what happens. Once that's done, then we go to the Mythos phase. And there, everyone is going to draw 2 tokens from the Mythos Cup and resolve their effects. Everyone does that in turn order. So, action phase is the first thing. You may move from one place to the next. You may, and that's two moves for 1 action, okay? You may even spend money, by the way, to move additional steps. You can gather resources, which is take a buck. And here is the money in the game. You can take $1 if you choose for 1 action. You can focus, which means increasing one of your skills. So if I want to focus one of these, I could, take an observation token, and now my observation goes from 2 to 3 characters normally have a focus limit, i.e. how many of those they can have on their card. You can ward, which is testing one of your skills, in this case lore at the top, in order to remove doom equal to the result you get from your space. If you remove 2 or more, you're going to get a little bonus. You can attack, you can evade a monster, you can research, which means taking clues you've gathered, which normally sit here on your character, and adding them to the actual scenario sheet. So, and that means they're actually on, you've locked them in. You can trade with someone else, or if you have any component that says action something something, then you can take that action as well. So whenever you do a test in this game, you are going to be rolling dice. So for example, let's take a look at Agnes here again. She's going to, for her first action, move. So that's one action, two steps. And then she is going to ward, which means she gets to roll 4 dice, and 5s and 6s are successes. So she's going to roll that. She got plenty of successes for each one. She would be able to remove one of these doom tokens from the board. She did that. Now, assuming there had been more than 1 there, she would have rolled that same roll. She would have removed 2, and if you remove 2, you get a remnant token. And this token doesn't really do anything until something tells you it does something, but you can spend them normally to fire up and use spell cards, which are costly. Usually they eat away at your sanity, but sometimes you can spend those remnants to keep that at bay. Next up, I'll go ahead and have Dexter Drake here, my other character. He's going to take his turn. He's going to move there, and he's also going to do a ward action, rolling, no successes whatsoever. Again, a 5 or a 6 being a success. So that's done, and then we move on to the monster phase, in which every monster is going to likely move. So this monster here will move 2 spaces. It tells you where it moves. In this case, this is a patrolling monster. It moves towards the unstable space, listed on the highest discard. 1, 2. This one, same thing. So it might move 1, 2, and engage with her. You'd then flip it over and put it in front of yourself, and it gives you the stats that you are going to be dealing with as to how many hit points it has, if it's hard to fight or run away from, and how many it would hit you for when it's attacking. So next up we do an encounter phase. Well, this one would actually hit her and she takes a hit, okay? 1 damage. Then we do the encounter phase, in which everybody is going to draw an encounter and resolve it. She would not do so, Agnes, because she's engaged with a monster. And again, the Agnes player would have this in front of them. But this player will, so they're going to draw a card from the matching location. Now, normally these cards are going to look like that, and you're going to read the section for wherever you are. However, as you see, there's a clue here. Whenever there's a clue in a location, that means you draw a card from this, and you are going to add a clue to the center of wherever it tells you, and then you shuffle this card into the top 3 of that deck. When that card comes up, and in this case it did, you might have an opportunity to gain that clue. So we've got here, he is sitting at the curiosity shop. It says, you find an odd item on the shelf, a plastic case with a silvery disc inside and a rubber cord running to small headphones. You gain 1 clue from your neighborhood. The wizened proprietor asks if you'd like to buy anything. You may buy any number of curio items from the display. Fantastic. I got this, and now I can buy items. Now I have an item deck over here, which I'm not really showing you, but there would be 5 of these cards face up on the table, and now this player could spend some money to possibly buy some of these for, boosts and effects, things like that. So that's how encounters work. Now that that card gave me the clue, it would be discarded. If it had not given me a clue, I shuffle it back into the top 3 cards again, and the clue stays there so that I may find it later on, all right? And that's it for that phase, and then we go to the last phase, in which we are going to draw tokens from this bag here. And everybody gets 2, so you draw 1. Sometimes they spawn new monsters. Sometimes they are going to put out clues. Sometimes they are going to open more doom. Sometimes you have to draw headlines. The doom spreads. things like that. Once the bag is empty, and only then do you take all of these tokens and then put them back into the bag for the next time, for the next player. And that's one round in the game. So now, again, we go to the beginning with the players taking actions. Next time, she's very likely to fight this character. She would use her strength stat and roll dice and attempt to destroy that monster that's holding her back. As I said, as you are collecting different things, you are going to be advancing the story, and the deck is going to tell you, this numbered deck of cards, okay, great, you've done this, now draw card 3, or 5, or 12, or whatever, and add it to the display, read what's going on. If you satisfy this condition, now read card 14. If you did this other thing, go to card 15. And the story will develop. In fact, you're not even sure what you're trying to do or how you win at the beginning of the game, but there is a lot of story to be found here. The newspaper effect is drawing one of these cards, and they'll have some sort of headline on it and something that happens. Magician vanishes rabbit, comma, self. It tells you a little story, and then the headline says you disengage all monsters and move to the unstable space. Sometimes you lose sanity, sometimes you have to make tests, things like that. Whenever you draw monsters in the game, you are going to take them from the bottom of this pile, and they will tell you where they spawn and how you deal with them, but not the top. As they die, they go back to the top, okay? You are also going to be, as I said, putting out clues. Those come from the top of this rack. If you are putting out Doom, that comes from the bottom of this rack. Eventually, it's possible that these places are going to lock down, and you are going to have to deal with locations that are overrun. Basically, a gate has opened up, and so, you know, if a place has either 3 Doom, like this, or there are 5 in total someplace, then one of these is going to show up, and you are going to have to deal with that by removing all of the Doom. Will you then be able to get rid of that? And in fact, if you have an encounter there, you don't draw it from the matching location. Instead, you draw it from this special deck here that the game tells you to set up, depending on which scenario you are dealing with. So very dangerous. Also, any new Doom that would show up in a place that already has this token in the center goes directly to the scenario sheet, and that's how bad things progress story-wise. So that should give you a pretty good idea of everything. Obviously, I'm skipping some things here. I'm glossing over quite a bit of it, but that gives you an idea of the general flow of the game and the kinds of things you can expect to see. So let's go back up top. Let me tell you what I think of the game. Before I get to my final thoughts, I do want to mention that I am not much of a fan at all of Arkham Horror, the previous edition of this. I did not like Eldritch Horror very much either. I thought it was marginally better than Arkham Horror, but still didn't really do kind of what it promised it would do. Mansions of Madness is neat, but it's a little slow moving. I really, though, love Arkham Horror, the card game. It's a fantastic design, rich in story, lots of player choices. And it's one that's one of my favorite games ever. So I really, really like that. Now this game here kind of feels like an amalgamation of mechanisms from all of those games I mentioned, made into a new package. And so therefore you're going to get sort of a lot of refinements of things, but not necessarily a lot of new and I mean entirely new concepts in this one. So let me dive into what I think of it. I just wanted to set that up before I start. I'll start with the negatives, okay? The things I don't like about this game. And that is, the game is still too long. For some reason, they are unable to crack that part of it. This game is still easily 3 hours. And that's a long time. You know, if this was consistently 90 minutes, let's say, it would be much more appealing to me, and I assume to a lot of people who could get it to the table much easier, you know, in a more palatable time frame. And then the other thing I don't like is that there's quite a bit of disparity between the amount of time you're spending taking player actions. You do your 2 actions, you're going to do some things, and then upkeep, having things happen to you. You know, you have one phase in which everyone takes 2 actions. Some of those actions are sometimes very basic, like take a buck. Now, you know, that's a pretty lame action, but those are the kinds of things you are going to do. And then all other 3 of the 4 actions are move the monsters, figure out where they go, they might engage and attack you. The next one is draw a card, read the card, some stuff happens to you, and then finally draw tokens from the bag. Everyone draws 2, and again, kind of have stuff happen to you, or just do upkeep. You know, move tokens here and there. The ratio of you doing stuff to stuff being just sort of happening, you know, is wow, that's crazy. That's not necessarily awful. I'm just pointing that out so that you're aware of it. And I did find it to be interesting that I felt like I was doing very little myself. Whereas the card game, for example, that ratio feels a lot closer. Yeah, there's a lot of upkeep. There's a lot of managing things, reading cards, advancing this deck or that deck, moving monsters. But it felt like there was more of the time, more of the, 3 hours, however long I'm playing, or 2 hours or 90 minutes in that game. I felt like I was doing more than in this one. Everything else I like in this game, sometimes really like it. So the theme here is strong. The stories are cohesive. It is the stories are well told. I really think they finally nailed it when it comes to telling a story, much like in the card game, that makes sense. Yes, the monsters, are going to be in here this one time, over there next time. Sometimes you have encounters that don't tie into what you're doing. But everything makes sense for where you are, and the overall story is strong. The component quality and all of that, the aesthetics, everything looks great. Everything is well made. Artwork is fantastic. Component quality is solid across the board. The only thing I don't like is I find the tiles, the way you make the board, those tiles are a tight fit sometimes. Having that street between 2 of the hexes, I worry about them getting frayed quickly because they're a tight fit. So that's a concern. Ease of play. This is pretty streamlined, and so I find that the game has good player aids. The archive does a great job of keeping you on task, knowing what you're going for. Those cards that you set on the side, that's the archive, and then just sort of helping you figure out what's going on and doing your turns. I have a little bit of a problem with the way the monsters move. Sometimes there's a little wiggle room for how to manage the monster movement. But overall, again, for this kind of game's pretty easy to play. And then lastly, tactics and strategy. I really like the game's tough. There's no question about that, but the cooperation is solid. I like the focusing mechanic. I like all of that. I like the idea of being able to spend tokens to re-roll. You can spend your focus tokens that you gave yourself a boost with. You can lose that boost in order to re-roll dice. And I like that very much too. The items are fantastic. I really find them thematic and engaging and interesting. There's a lot that's neat here. 4 scenarios, a lot of people are going to say is not enough. I think the replayability is actually pretty good. I find the fact that there are branching story paths to keep that replayability up, and a lot of it is going to be different. Yeah, the story will be largely the same, but so much else is happening that it won't feel like the same session. You'll feel like you're playing, a new play. So I like that as well. Now, obviously, expansions are on the way for this, I can only assume, and I think they're going to add to the replayability quite a bit. So overall, I think they finally cracked the code here when it comes to storytelling in a board game. The card game does it quite well, I think, but the board game here borrows from that system and several other games and finally nails the storytelling. The player involvement is a little on the low side compared to how much upkeep you're doing, but I think that's something you kind of get used to, especially when you get good at, speeding those phases along. But overall, yeah, this is a solid game. Still long, but, the best one from all of those, except, in my opinion, for the card game. The card game is amazing. This is good. So I'm going to give this one a seal of approval. I think you should, if you're a fan of the previous board games, I think you're going to dig this. There's no question, go out and get it. If you are someone that had perhaps some of the same issues I did with the previous ones, convoluted, mechanisms, really long and sort of loosey-goosey storytelling, if you had an issue with some of those things, I would recommend this one, you know, because those are my issues, and I actually liked this game. I've been enjoying my plays of it. So there you go. Seal of approval for Arkham Horror, the new Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. I'm Z Garcia. I'll see you on the next one.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com.